Thank you so much for coming. All right, seriously. I'm here to introduce some very, very, very cool people doing some very cool things. All right, we're going to start down here at the end. This panel is about bipartisan Bitcoin. So if you're not here for politics, you're in the wrong room. That said, maybe stick around. Here we got Dennis Porter. Dennis Porter is the head of grassroots development at the Bitcoin Advocacy Project. He's been doing grassroots development all throughout Bitcoin, really engaged politically. He's involved talking with lawmakers, talking with candidates, really one of the most active and important people in the Bitcoin political movement. Next, we have Erica Rhodes. Erica is running for House in California against Brad Sherman. If you all don't know, Brad Sherman is a sitting member of Congress who has publicly called for the ban of cryptocurrency. So,
boo!
Boo this man.
Boo this man, cheer Erica. All right, we need Bitcoin champions, and that will be something we talk about here. Next is Pete Rizzo. Pete is the editor at Bitcoin Magazine. He's also the co-author of Bitcoin and the American Dream. Again, this is a bipartisan Bitcoin panel. You're going to hear some really amazing things, really diverse perspectives. And then finally, we have Josh Mandel. Josh Mandel is running for Senate in Ohio. Josh, former treasurer in Ohio. He was actually the first, he helped make Ohio the first state to accept Bitcoin as taxes. So when we talk about OGs, we talk about people who walk the walk and not just talk the talk. That's Josh. So again, we're talking about bipartisanship, okay? First question, what does that even mean? Okay, I'm gonna posit this for you first, Dennis, right? This is a core focus for your work. What does bipartisanship mean? What does it mean with relation to Bitcoin?
Well, it's critical for me for some time now that we ensure that Bitcoin is maintained as something that's bipartisan, or you could say non-partisan, right? Ultimately, the reason why it's so important that we have both sides working together on Bitcoin is we don't want to get into a situation where one party is constantly fighting against Bitcoin. So it's been my mission for some time to ensure that we get involvement from both sides. That's why I've worked so closely with Erica Rhodes and her campaign to ensure that she's positioned well to take out one of the most anti-Bitcoin members of Congress. And we're very excited about the progress we've made with her race. When it comes down to it, we want to be fighting for pro-Bitcoin policy 100% of the time instead of 50% of the time. We want to be competing for better policy and not trying to work against those that don't have Bitcoin's best interests in mind.
Definitely. And before Erica and Josh, we go to you. Pete.
Oh, sure.
You co-authored a book called Bitcoin and the American Dream. Again, this book spoke to both sides. It spoke to an average American. It spoke to people all across the country. So what does bipartisanship mean to you with regards to Bitcoin?
Yeah, I'll take that. First, I'd just be curious to pull the audience out there. How many people out there identify as Republicans? Show of hands. A couple. How many people identify as Democrats? Okay. How many people are just totally dissatisfied and identify with neither?
Independent voters.
A lot of hands out there. Yeah, so I think Bitcoin and the American Dream, the book was really presenting from the perspective of Bitcoin voters, right? I think bipartisanship is still an aspiration, right? We understand that this is a deeply divided country right now. And the process of this book was they actually got 6 or 7 Bitcoiners from different backgrounds into a house, and we co-authored a book together collaboratively. And these are people diverse in race, age, all sorts of things. And I think what we found from that process is that a lot of us know that Bitcoin cuts across party lines, but I don't know if that really translates into bipartisanship just yet, right? So I would say, in the spirit of the book, bipartisanship is a vision, it's an aspiration, and something we hope we can achieve, but maybe not yet.
So that's the perfect segue. Erica, I want to hear from you. Bipartisanship in practice.
I think bipartisanship is necessary. You know, for me, I'm a school teacher, and like I would vote and I would be, pay attention to what's happening in politics, but it wasn't until 2020 when I decided to be active. And you see that nothing gets done in Washington because it's automatic hate. They don't focus on the solutions. They're not interested in data. They don't listen to everyday people. And so that's why we need term limits. We need to make sure that these people cannot just live on these seats and die on these seats forever. We need new voices, people that can reflect their community. And I think that if we really are serious about making a difference, then we have to talk across the aisle. We have to be able to have civil discourse, be able to talk to one another, genuinely listen to understand, and just get to the root of the problems, because at the end of the day, the way that these two parties are working is solving nothing. So that's how I feel about bipartisanship.
Want to hear a lot of clapping. It's great.
Yeah. Josh, as a former elected official in Ohio, you've had to work across the aisle, right? So what does that look like, and what are your plans for bipartisanship if you're elected into the Senate?
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, when we take a step back and we look at the fact that so many of us came to Bitcoin because we believe in individual liberty and we believe in personal freedom, those first principles of individual liberty and personal freedom, they're not really Democrat or Republican, right? Like whether you're a Democrat, Republican, independent, libertarian, vegetarian, whatever you are, we all want liberty for our families. We all want freedom for us as individuals. And frankly, it's something that separates America from so many other countries. The concept of advancing a nonpartisan or bipartisan Bitcoin caucus in the US Senate, for me, is one that's exciting because I think the only way we can advance our cause in Washington, especially in the United States Senate, is if we are very disciplined about being completely nonpartisan. And there's right now in the U.S. Senate, there's only one champion, I would say. It's Cynthia Lummis. Wyden on the Democrat side is not bad, but I wouldn't say he's a champion like Lummis is. And what I'd like to do in the U.S. Senate is try to build a Bitcoin caucus full of champions. And in the United States Senate or in the United States House, there's a big difference between friends and champions. A friend is someone who maybe at the end of the day might vote the right way, but you got to hold their hand and pull them along. A champion is someone who every single morning will wake up living and breathing and sleeping this issue. Someone who will go to other United States senators and educate them on proof of work, educate them on self-custody, educate them on the foundational principles behind our movement.
So, yeah, we need more Bitcoin champions. Okay, so Erica, I want to give you a chance to respond to that, right? So Josh's framework of a Bitcoin champion, what does that mean to you? How did Bitcoin become part of your race, right? Josh, you've been in Bitcoin for years. Erica, tell us a little bit about your story and when you knew Bitcoin needed to be part of your campaign.
So I think it's interesting that we're polar opposites politically, but we can find common ground on this issue.
You're a big Trump supporter, right?
No, I'm not.
Wait, look into the camera, make sure they know that.
Or Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz, my guy.
I know. But I do think it's awesome that we're able to find common ground on this issue. I do think that people have the right to invest in whatever they want to invest in. And what I find to be extraordinary about my take on Bitcoin is similar to you, but also young people were the ones that asked me to put it on my platform. And I believe that young voices should be elevated and supported. And there's a lot of kids that hold Bitcoin. They asked me to put it on my platform. Dennis, after Brad Sherman had a hearing, he talked all this crazy nonsense, reached out to me, and I really did my due diligence to learn, and I love it. I'm excited about it. Our campaign happily accepts Bitcoin via Lightning, and I think it's the future. And I think that, both Brad Sherman and Elizabeth Warren are wrong on this issue. And so for me, I do plan on being an advocate in Washington. I do plan on also being a part of the Bitcoin caucus. And what I find to be awesome is that you have, as the last time I looked, it was 17 Republicans and 16 Democrats. So there is common ground, and I think that if we're serious about being innovative and making sure that this stays in the United States, then we need support from across the political spectrum to ensure this. And that is by unseating Brad Sherman and electing me.
Just to piggyback on what Erica said, Elizabeth Warren's not just wrong. I mean, she's a Luddite. I mean, these are dinosaurs. And I think we have to go on offense. I live in Ohio, where people don't realize this, but if you took the state of Ohio, the state of Pennsylvania, and the state of West Virginia, and you combined our three states into a region, that region under President Trump was the third largest producer of natural gas in the entire world.
Trump doesn't support Bitcoin, though.
Pennsylvania, West
You're
Virginia.
championing him, but he doesn't support Bitcoin.
Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio. And so if you look at like what's happening in Colorado with a lot of the gas that's being flared out there from oil wells, I was in West Texas and Midland not too long ago. You see flare everywhere. And I see this great opportunity in America, whether it's in Colorado, Texas, Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, to view our natural resources as assets. Assets for bringing down the cost of manufacturing in America, assets for bringing down the cost of heating people's homes in America, assets for bringing down the cost of filling up our gas pumps in America, but also assets for mining Bitcoin in America. And this is one of those issues where it's not Democrat or Republican. We should have United States senators, United States congressmen viewing our natural resources, the oil and gas in America, are great opportunities to be leaders for Bitcoin mining.
So, Josh, I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier, which was, this is about freedom, right? This is about, I think a lot of people would describe Bitcoin as being about self-autonomy, personal sovereignty, the ability to live your life the way you want to live it, actually having choice over the way you live your life. And so I'm curious because this was something, I believe it was Pete Buttigieg in 2020 identified. He said, when did freedom and liberty become conservative values?
Right.
So I actually want to hear from all of you, and really quickly, because Pete, Bitcoin historian, you've been in this space for a very long time, so you've been able to see the evolution of this community of Bitcoin. So starting with Pete.
Yeah, sure.
Going with Josh really quickly. Why does Bitcoin seem to lean one way or another? Is that a valid perception? And just kind of walk us through what you've seen in the space over the past decade plus.
Yeah, I would start with a clarifying misconception, right? I think a lot of people have this idea that Bitcoin's not regulated in the United States. It is regulated. I think it's just that we don't like the regulations, and they're not helping us move forward, right? If you kind of go back and roll back the timeline, every major three-letter agency has been active and kind of interested in Bitcoin since 2013, 2014. The IRS came in and regulated a property. We're finding now is that these are just the things that are holding us back, right? So in the process of writing the book, we talked about a host of issues like how it benefits small businesses, how it's good for jobs, BIPOC inclusion, that there are people who want to spend Bitcoin right now. They want to, help further that circular economy of the Lightning Network growing. And right now it's the regulation that's holding it back. So I would say, look, it's great that the regulators came out early and they didn't, there was no ban in the United States, but the regulation that we have isn't working, right? And that's why it's great to see people like, who we have on this panel eager to make change, right?
Definitely. So, Josh, speaking to that point, when did freedom and liberty become conservative values? How does that relate to this bipartisanship angle? And how is Bitcoin something that can unite us?
Right. So if you watch the Super Bowl, you saw a lot of variety of different types of digital asset companies spending a lot of money, Super Bowl ads, exchanges and mining companies and all these different companies. I don't care how much they spend on Super Bowl ads. I don't care how much they're spending on sponsoring this conference. The most valuable advertisement for Bitcoin in any of our lifetimes thus far is Justin Trudeau. Because what happened recently, you had big government, big banks, and big tech colluding with each other to seize the assets of hardworking truck drivers and middle-class families. And ladies and gents, don't think for a second that that wasn't a beta test. What happened in Canada was the beta test for America. There is no way in the world that Trudeau would have done that without a green light from someone in Washington, D.C. And so when you ask the question, Grant, about freedom and liberty, what Trudeau did up there should be a giant wake-up call for every American citizen of why Bitcoin is the greatest asset for the advancement of our freedom and liberty.
I want to jump in here a little bit real quick because
Good,
I think something is important in this conversation around who has control over power in the government, right? Currently, the Democrats have a lot of control. And so the status quo and maintaining the status quo is important to them. Bitcoin is bottom up, and so it's attractive to the folks that are out of the status quo and that want to make a change and want to make a difference. So I do think you will see, when we see a shift, which is coming, whether it's this election cycle or the next, eventually Republicans will be in power again. And that's why I think it's important for us to have this mindset that it's not right or left. It's the state and the power versus the people, right? And so it's also critical why we have guys like Josh Mandel in office for when those things shift, and he's there as a champion to be able to say, we need to make sure that we're still in line with the ethos of Bitcoin. And also on the side of Erica Rhodes as well, that they can be able to work in the House and the Senate to defend Bitcoin against the state.
Bipartisan, bicameral.
I think when it comes to Bitcoin, and I'll speak from two different perspectives. One, I have seen in my own community that it's pulled people out of poverty, that people are excited about it. They hate the fact that Brad is introducing legislation to potentially ban it and the rhetoric around it, and not understanding the technology. And I think my responsibility when elected is to make sure that Democrats are not sleeping at something like this, and that we're bringing people along and educating them so we can allow this to advance. I think that's really, really important, and I think you do need people from both sides of the aisle. Second, as a candidate, it's allowed me to be competitive with a long-term incumbent, and I do think that this is another alternative for campaign finance. If we are serious about throwing the power back to the people, we need to get big money out of politics. We need to ban stock trading. We need to have term limits. And Lightning Network has allowed me to raise thousands of dollars to go toe-to-toe with him, because when you go through Lightning, they're only taking a small percentage. So that means a grassroots teacher candidate like myself gets to hold the entire contribution. Versus if we go through Act Blue, they take 4%. Well, that adds up when you're starting to, raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, and when someone's giving to a candidate, it's because they want to see them in Washington or at their state legislature. And so I think in the future, too, especially if I win, that you will see more candidates embracing Lightning, Bitcoin, and using it as campaign finance reform. And then there's going to be an incentive in Washington to protect it.
So, Pete, again, Bitcoin and the American dream. You talk about bipartisanship as aspirational. What happens if Bitcoin is not bipartisan? What do the next 5 to 10 years, 20 years of Bitcoin adoption look like as a result?
Well, look, I think we're already seeing what that looks like. We have Bitcoin as legal tender in El Salvador, the president there, and you can already see that what happened very quickly there was it became very unpopular with the opposition party, right? There were riots in the streets. People, you can debate whether it was real or whether this was, political theater, but there were T-shirts, anti-Bitcoin. This became the rallying cry of the opposition party, right? So I look at that and saying, this has happened. It is happening. It has happened in parts of the world that Bitcoin is being politicized. And I think that's the future we want to avoid, and that was the spirit of the book.
So, Erica, we have a few minutes left, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up what around half of the Democratic Party seems to continually bring up when it comes to Bitcoin, which is Bitcoin mining, energy usage, and the environmental impact. If you're elected into Congress, what do you say to an Elizabeth Warren? What do you say to someone who maybe hasn't publicly gone for or against Bitcoin, but is really concerned about the energy usage? What's that conversation like?
I'm not going to wait till I get elected to talk to Senator Warren. We're trying to do that now. Because there's so much at stake. And I think that there's an education piece that's missing. And so I'm in the process of making this happen, to have a one-off conversation and to really explain it to her, because I think there's a disconnect. I am concerned maybe there's money involved somewhere where you're taking this other side. There's a lot says a lot about a candidate where they get their money. And so I'm not waiting until I'm in Congress to talk to her, because it's very important, because legislation is moving quickly right now. But I also think, too, if people are really serious about the future of Bitcoin, if you're really serious about it, then the best thing you can do is get candidates in office that understand it and that are going to fight for it now. And that means donating to our campaigns. If you live in our districts, voting for us, making sure if you know people in our districts, tell them to vote for us. Because then you already know that you have a friend in Washington that's already going to do the right thing, and then you're not going to be on pins and needles all the time. That's personally why I got in, because I was done waiting for him to fight for the things that I care about. And I'm done protesting, I'm done holding a sign. I want legislation. I want to make a difference, and I want to throw the power back to the people. And so that's how I feel about it.
So
Erica, can I ask just a follow-up on
Sure.
Grant's question? So I don't think you can be for Bitcoin mining in America without being for oil and gas exploration in
Why
America.
do you think that?
And so, because like so much of the Bitcoin mining in America is now being produced from from flaring from oil and gas
Then I
drilling.
think
And
you're
so, let me
underestimating.
just finish my question. So can you help us understand, with so many Bitcoin miners now making money and depending on oil and gas drilling, how can you be for Bitcoin mining but then not be for oil and gas drilling? Maybe you are for oil and gas drilling too, but like it's just something I don't understand about today's Democrat Party, where natural gas is cleaner than coal. It brings down the cost for middle class and working class families. It's like win-win-win, and it's pro Bitcoin mining. So like, are you for oil and gas drilling or against?
You could talk to me without being passive aggressive. And two, I think you're missing the innovation piece. Like, I spoke with Jack Dorsey, and there's a lot of things that's happening with the way that we mine Bitcoin through solar, through wind, and there's a lot of technology that's coming out, so it is environmentally friendly. And I do support the mining. I've actually spent a majority of my time at this conference talking to miners.
I know you do, but I'm asking, do you support oil and gas drilling?
I think that we do need to be conscientious of the environment, and I think that we need to learn about it and find ways so we can mine the Bitcoin, but also be cognizant of the environment.
For oil and gas drilling in America?
All right, really quick. This isn't a debate. It's a panel. It's a discussion. So, Dennis, I want to shift gears. We've talked about this top-down approach. We talked about what happens.
I want to say something. I'm sorry. This is why bipartisanship is super important, because you're trying to challenge me versus hearing what I'm saying. And this is what I meant by talking at someone. You know, I'm on the same side as you on this issue, and I'm telling you that there's a way that we could potentially mine the Bitcoin through wind and through solar. And there's miners that are actually trying to do that. They're taking methane from the air to be able to mine the Bitcoins. There's so much innovation in this, and I think you're underestimating the potential. And that's why we need people on both sides of the aisle fighting for it. And let's be clear here. The thing with the mining that I find to be awesome is that it's job creation. You know, there's so many things that we can do from different angles within the Bitcoin industry, from marketing, from the mining, from the investment, from, you know, working with small businesses. You know, I have the largest deaf community in the country, and one of the things that's hard for them is employment, and there's so much opportunity. And so I think, you know, you could press me on oil and gas, or we can have a meaningful conversation about how can we find common ground on how we mine mine Bitcoin and still be environmentally conscious.
So you both tapped into something there, and funny enough, I don't think this is personal or has to be personal. This is how we reach consensus. This is how we reach middle ground, right? It's through structured debate and conversation, right? Like it might feel to you all out there like this is maybe a little, there's some tension, right? But like if we don't have these difficult conversations, we don't get anywhere, right? We end up with what we have in government today. Okay, so Dennis, I want to know, you're talking to people on the ground, right? You're broaching these conversations. You're speaking to people, right? Democrats, Republicans. What are people on the left saying about mining? What are people on the right saying about mining? How have you found common ground through your work?
I mean, ultimately, you can mine Bitcoin in a green way, or you can mine Bitcoin with the dirtiest coal you can find on the planet.
Five.
It doesn't, either way, you're able to approach Bitcoin mining the way that you think is most important to you. If you want to support the oil and gas industry, you can mine in coordination with your values. If your values say, I want to mine Bitcoin in a green way, guys like Troy Cross from BPI are doing incredible work to allow people to mine in the way that they see that is in line with their values. And that's the greatest thing about Bitcoin, is it truly brings everyone together. And regardless of literally how far left or how far right we go, we can both finally find something to agree on in this country where division has completely taken over every aspect of the political spectrum.
I just want to say, because I think this is important, half of my family's Republican and half of my family is Democrats. And so I approach my politics with common sense, being rational, reasonable, and that's how I roll. And so that's one of the things I love about Bitcoin is because I literally have support across the political spectrum. And we have a common goal of making sure that this is successful in the United States. We have to keep this in the United States. And so I will always come to the table wanting to make sure that it stays here.
So look, we're out of time. I want to give each of you 15 seconds. What is your elevator pitch? Erica, Josh, you go first. You're the candidates. Pitch these people right now. Why should they vote for you?
You go first. You're running for Senate.
I mentioned it earlier, I'll say it again. Like, we don't need friends in the US Senate, we need champions. We need people who are gonna wake up every morning living and breathing and sleeping, advancing the cause of the democratization of money. We need people who will wake up every morning taking on Gary Gensler, Jamie Dimon, Elizabeth Warren, and make it a project. And I plan on using the blue slip and the advise and consent important role of the United States Senator to hold up any confirmations nominated by Democrat or Republican presidents of people to the SEC, FTC, the Federal Reserve, Treasury, what have you, who are anti-Bitcoin. And for anyone who's pro-Bitcoin, I will do everything I can to advance their cause and shepherd them through. And I plan on building a Bitcoin caucus in the United States Senate. Right now, it's a one-person Bitcoin caucus. It's Cynthia Lummis. But we're going to multiply like gremlins and build a big one.
That's what I'm talking about. Erica, go for it. And Pete, I want you to finish this off after with some final thoughts.
I'm running for Congress. I filed to run for Congress because everyday people need representation. We need to throw the power back to the people. And I do believe that young people need to be heard and elevated, and I think we need to make a lot of reforms. So I'm not going into Congress to attack current city members. I'm going to pass legislation and to really put my head down and work hard. Proof of work. And that's all our campaign is we have worked so hard just talking to people, no matter where you are, whatever your political stance is. I'm going there to make a difference. I have given up everything for this congressional race, literally lost it all for that 3% chance. And for me, what we need in Congress are people that really, really genuinely care about solving problems, like genuinely caring about it, and not being performative, not trying to do things just for clout or whatnot, but really want to sit down and get to the root of the problems. And then I'll say to the Bitcoin community, if you are serious about unseating Congressman Brad Sherman, you have to donate to our campaign, because the only way we are going to lose is if we don't have the money. And that's straight up. We have a coalition on the ground. We have a lot of support within our community, but it's going to take being financed to make sure that we get to the finish line. And this race is absolutely winnable. And I will absolutely, stay true to my morals and values and stand by the support of the Bitcoin community because I love it. And my mom holds Bitcoin, so I'd never go against my mom.
Look, we've got two fighters up here. Pete, Dennis, take us home.
I'll keep it short. I'll speak on behalf of the Bitcoin voters who wrote the book for. I think we outline the issues. We have clear demands. We're optimistic, and we're excited by panels like this. So, Dennis?
Yeah, just like one super quick comment on the idea of contributions that we've seen for the first time ever. I am talking to lifelong Democrats who are contributing to candidates like Cynthia Lummis for the very first time. They're contributing to Bitcoin candidates that are champions in the Senate. I'm talking to lifelong Republicans who regularly message me and tell me that they are contributing to Erica's race. And this is something I think that is going to continue. And I hope that we continue to see that we can contribute to candidates that are on the opposite end of the aisle to ensure that Bitcoin maintains itself as a bipartisan concept in America.
We're about to hit you with the Jeb Bush. Please clap. Okay. Thank you so much for attending. In case you can't tell, we brought 4 very diverse perspectives here. And again, Bitcoin is what united people on this panel. These conversations don't happen. I don't know how many rallies or town halls or whatever political events you attend. This does not happen. And we wouldn't be here without Bitcoin. We wouldn't be here without the courage and frankly, the dignity and respect that you all have brought to this panel. So I thank you. Please feel free, come and talk to us. Come and talk to these candidates. Come please talk about their race. Talk about what Dennis is doing at the Bitcoin Advocacy Project. Talk about what Pete's doing at Bitcoin Magazine. We got to go. They're getting really mad. They're kicking us out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.